ready to go. Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Writer, and this week, oh my goodness me, we are going to be doing a review of probably maybe one of the worst movies in the early 80s. This was 1981's version of Heaven's Gate. I am talking about Mommie Dearest. Now, Mommie Dearest runs for 2 hours and 9 minutes long. It is directed by Frank Perry. It is produced by Frank Yablans. The script was also done by Frank Perry and Frank Yablans, as well as Robert Getchell and Tracy Hotchny. It is, of course, based off of the novel by Christina Crawford. She based this off of her memoirs of her being raised by her mother, who was, of course, a well-known, very, very famous Hollywood actress. I'm talking about Joan Crawford, and the trials and tribulations that she had to endure during the time she was raised by her mother. She really, really paints a very negative picture. But we will, of course, go through all those details very shortly. The score was done by the legendary Henry Mancini, the cinematography by Paul Lohman, and the editing by Peter E. Berger. And the stars of the movie are Hollywood legend. I'm talking Faye Dunaway, who, of course, had been in a slew full of movies. Dating back to the 60s. You know, she was Bonnie Parker in the 1966 movie Bonnie and Clyde, which of course she also co-starred with Warren Beatty and Gene Hackman. Okay, also joining the cast includes Diana Scarwid. We also have Mara Hobel. We also have Steve Forrest, Howard De Silva, Rutanya, Alda, Harry Goss, Michael Edwards. We have Jocelyn Brando, who is, of course, you know, the sister of screen legend Marlon Brando. We also have Priscilla Pointer, Xander Berkeley, Jeremy Scott Reinbolt, Carolyn Coates, Margaret Fairchild, Belita Moreno, and Alice Nunn. You know something, I'm a very, very patient individual, and I can sit through good movies, I can sit through garbage, and I can stomach a lot of movies. Even some of the more trashier ones, I can still tolerate and find maybe even something good about it. But after watching Mommie Dearest, all I can say is that this movie fucking traumatized me, and for all the wrong reasons. I know Halloween season is coming up, but sometimes I'm beginning to think that this movie, Mommie Dearest, felt more closer to a horror movie as opposed to a typical biopic drama. I mean, this movie kind of scarred me for quite a long time. It makes me feel like I just want to come up to my mother, give her a big hug, and tell her, thank God you're not like Joan Crawford. At least you won't get pissed off if I hang my clothes with a wire hanger. I'll explain more and you'll probably understand what I mean. This movie didn't really anger me, to say the least, but it actually, this movie kind of saddened me, because the movie is just a constant compilation of the never-ending embittered feud between Hollywood movie star Joan Crawford, played by Faye Dunaway, and her adopted daughter Christina, who was played by Mara Hobel as a child, and then later by Diana Scarwid as an adult. Which goes from, which goes from unnecessary abuse to envy, and it even gets even more downright ugly. The whole thing about this movie just is so unsettling and so intense that I was like, is this for real? Was Joan Crawford really like this? Or was Christina Crawford wrote a book just to get vengeance on her and exploit her in such a convoluted, hyperbolic way that I kind of am wondering, was Joan Crawford really that much of a monster? Or was this just some vengeance plot for Christina Crawford to just spew out negativity of the events that happened in her life? And we sometimes have to stop and ask and wonder what is real and what isn't. I guess unless we lived the moments, who are we to judge? I know I may have probably said this many times before with many different ways that I finally come to the brink of self-paraphrasing, but this is kind of like what I often say to myself. Is this real? Or was this, a lot of dramatic licensing just to make us convinced that Joan Crawford was a tyrannical monster of a mother who practically tried to ruin her children's lives? I mean, I don't know. There are part of me that makes me want to believe it, and then there are part of me that thinks this is all just a ruse, just to get even. I don't know. All I can say is that actress Faye Dunaway tends to get very carried away, overplaying each scene, and you may think it's trying to get a message across when unfortunately it gets you nowhere. All it does is inject fear, intimidation, and like I said, this movie felt more like a horror film than it felt like a biopic. I mean, Faye Dunaway just practically scares me. And horror films don't necessarily have to come with, creepy, spooky manifestations or massive body counts or kill counts or anything like that. A horror film could be just an average, normal person scaring the living shit out of you. And Faye Dunaway unintentionally does that throughout most of the movie. I mean, there's part of you that really feels bad for her, but at the same time, you can't really feel too much pity for Joan Crawford because she is a metaphoric monster. Maybe not in the physical sense, but in a more hypothetical sense. She just seems so unhinged that I don't really know what's going on. I don't know what's true and what's bullshit. Many fans think it's campy, cult classic, and entertaining to the point of becoming farcical. Well, that's their opinion, to each their own. But to me, I found it to be very creepy and quite unsettling. So, based off of the tell-all memoirs from best-selling author Christina Crawford, the daughter of Hollywood legend Joan Crawford, the viewers are expected to believe that the events that transpired in the movie were true. However, we audience members are not 100% convinced that this was authentic or whether it was just a vengeance plot by Christine to expose Joan Crawford's strategy when it comes to parenting. I mean, she likes to paint herself off as being parent of the year when actually she was really just tyrant of the year. I mean, it was disgusting and despicable, some of the things she did, which I'll go over. And though some have sided with Christina, including her younger brother Christopher, who were practically disinherited after her death, there are still others like her younger siblings who said that this book, this memoir, was all complete, utter bullshit. We just don't know ourselves if she was domineering, egotistical, and overbearing, or was it just a ploy for Christina to get back at her mother for years of abuse and mistreatment? So, whatever the case may be, Mommie Dearest gives the impression that Joan Crawford was an overbearing, ruthless, inebriated diva who has her own set of rules that must never be disobeyed or compromised. If she wasn't inflicting torture to her daughter, she surely takes her wrath on anyone who tries to take her down. I mean, she's had many, many boyfriends, but they all kind of either abandoned her or she dumped them. And I think that whenever they said, it's over, honey, I don't know whether I should feel pity for Joan or should I actually congratulate the boyfriends in her life who have said, I'm stepping down, because I guess once they step out of her life, I guess they kind of find a newfound set of freedom. And you know what? Who can blame them? Who would want to be friends with somebody like her, or even let alone being in an intimate relationship? Whether this is a true account of her daughter and personality, or if it was a eventual plot on her daughter, one thing is for certain: it had an effect on me that would probably linger for a long time to come. You see, what really bugs me the most about Mommie Dearest is the fact the character never changes. She's always still the same. She never evolves. She never progresses. She's like this way throughout the whole movie. Even after her death, her motives were quite unbearable after disinheriting her children from her will. She's always been involved in their lives. She's always competitive. She's always depriving them of their fun, taking away things that was given to them. She kind of knows how to open up to the fans and to the public spectrum, but then once behind closed doors, she's a fucking monster. I mean, to tell you the truth, she was just a domineering wretch from the opening scenes, and she stays that way until the end, non-stop. Young Christina, through the years, wants to do everything to please her mother in every way possible, but Joan is just never happy for her and cruelly punishes her for the slightest error she commits, no matter what, both physical and verbal. Yes, there is some physical child abuse even in this movie. Even from when she was just a little girl. From the time that they were doing little swim races, of course Joan had to be the winner. But then again, it was not fair because of the fact that Joan is, much older and much more professional at swimming, and maybe she's also has a little more size advantage. The poor little girl, she just kept forcing her to keep swimming and swimming till she was getting tired, and even her boyfriend was like, come on, she's just a little girl. Or what about the time when Christina was, kind of mimicking her, and then Joan just, practically shaves her head bald, all for the sake of tough love. Or the time when she was playing dress up with her dolls and was mimicking Joan. Joan eventually takes the dolls away from her, sells them off to somebody to kids' orphanages, and just out of nowhere inflicts some kind of lame excuse. Or what about the time when she walks into Christina's bedroom and she sees her bedroom all with her clothes all nicely hung, but then she goes fucking ballistic when it discovers that Christina was hanging her clothes with wire hangers. And then she gets all ballistic and unhinged, and she starts screaming, "No wire hangers!" You know, she really explodes in this, and it's like hard to sit through. And then she practically just starts thrashing her bedroom with scattering clothes all over the place. And she was doing this all wearing freaking almost like kabuki makeup, which actually makes things even more frightening. You know, I always think that biopics should be rated PG, but this movie should be frickin' rated R. Or what about the time after she got fired from MGM because they thought she was box office poison? So what does she do? She goes into her garden and starts destroying, you know, chopping down trees in her backyard and ripping plants out from the roots. This is hard to sit through. And when she finally thinks that Christina is undisciplined, she sends her off to freaking boarding school. And then where she actually, you know, tries to excel well, she's doing great academically. And you think that for a second, oh, well, that's gotta please Joan Crawford. She's, you know, doing well in her boarding school. She seems to be a pretty bright student. She's got a nice, bright future ahead. Good for her. But does that please Miss Crawford? Absolutely not. Apparently, a handsome young boy was being a little flirty to her. You know, a casual teenage flirtiness. Nothing harmful. But then she starts, you know, calling her down, saying she's a slut or things like that. And eventually she takes her out of the school and sends her to a convent. And then there was this scene where she was getting an interview with some magazine about her parenting. But then Christina, you know, inevitably spills the beans and exploits her mother, saying that this is all a sham, and that she's being hypocritical in her parenting ways, and that she's actually an awful parent, which of course embarrasses Joan, and she practically almost comes close to choking Christina to death. I was thinking to myself, how much more torture can I get? This movie practically is something I probably wish to never have set eyes on. And I think I would be freaking upset if I ever actually got a chance to watch this movie ever again. One time only, that's it, folks. One time. Next, if anybody tries to make me watch Mommie Dearest again, I'll give you permission to stab me in the chest. That's how bad this movie is. That's how uncomfortable this movie is. Hell, I've watched Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street, and I don't get freaking traumatized by those kind of movies. But then you put me in a movie like Mommie Dearest, and it just practically scared me and gave me freaking nightmares for a long, long time. I could sit through A Nightmare on Elm Street. I could sit through The Exorcist. I could sit through these things. But Mommie Dearest was something I wasn't able to sit through very well. I mean, if she wasn't inflicting torture to her daughter, she certainly takes her wrath on anyone who tries to take her down. Whether this is a true account of her character and personality, or if this is a vengeful plot on her daughter, one thing is for certain, it has an effect on me that will linger for a long time to come. And like I said before, her character never evolves. And don't get me started, not only does she also seem to like to take her vengeance on her daughter, sometimes I even think she takes just as much domineering towards her son, Christopher. I mean, you ever notice that at nighttime, he's usually like chained up with a harness? And the reason why she does that is because she's afraid he might be jerking off in bed at night. So for his own precaution and for his own sanity, she has the kid like harnessed. This is some crazy shit, I tell you. Young Christina, through the years, wants to do everything to please her mother in every way possible, but Joan is never happy for her and cruelly punishes her for the slightest error she commits, no matter what, both physical and verbal. Miss Crawford is just set up to look manic depressive, and it's quite unsettling. One minute we see her basking in her triumphs, and then we cut to the next scene, and she's having a mental breakdown that is very uncomfortable to watch. See, one of the problems here is that there's a lack of congruency within each event. It's like we're just seeing just some brief, small snippets. And I think that the editing was quite atrocious because one minute we see Joan Crawford, in her moments of glory. Next thing you know, she's losing it over stuff that's not necessarily meant to be temperamental over. Such scenes we're treated to includes chopping off her daughter's hair with scissors, destroying her garden, beating her with a wire hanger, and then wrestling her to the ground, banging her head against the floor, and almost strangling her to death. And I want to tell you one thing, there's nothing entertaining about this at all. Okay, maybe you might say that, Nightmare on Elm Street, there's nothing entertaining about some deranged, creepy, demonic night stalker killing people in their dreams. But I can tolerate that because we know it's fiction and we know that it's stupid and it wasn't never meant to be taken seriously. It's a horror movie. It's meant to be a horror movie. This movie was a horror movie that was never meant to be a horror movie. But seeing the horrible things that she does in this movie makes me sometimes think maybe this movie was more of a horror movie than a Friday the 13th, a Halloween, or a Nightmare on Elm Street type of thing. Because this movie feels it in every way, shape, or form. Because it feels real. I don't know if it's everything here is confirmed to be real, but I do know one thing for sure. It may not be real, but it does feel real, and that's why this movie lacks in anything of entertainment value because it just feels real. Sometimes I begin to believe that maybe Joan Crawford was this horrible tyrant of a mother. Oh, she may have posed well on the cameras and may have basked in the glory with her fan base. But at the same time, she is just one scary motherfucker. The format to Mommie Dearest is made simply for shock value, but not in the way that's exciting, but to frighten you. There are no case studies to see what motivated Joan Crawford to become such an overbearing monster she is portrayed here. She's that way because she's driven by that way. Maybe it could be from a broken home, or maybe because of some bad upbringing. Maybe she was born poor, and maybe she just wants to stay as a legit individual as much as she could. And that she thought that even past 40, she still had everything for her. I don't know the real story, but yeah. Though there is some brief insight with Joan saying that she herself was brought up by an abusive mother. Well, in that case, then, you know, I guess I feel bad for her that she was raised that way. But just because she was raised by an abusive mother, that doesn't mean that her mother's ways worked. I mean, why not have a pledge and say that you were not going to raise your children that way? You know, sort of like, don't follow by example, follow by instinct. Though I can take some levels of sympathy for her, but there's just a lot of me that I can't, because she doesn't give us any reasons due to her actions and her behavior. Do I paint her off as an evil person? Even though I've said that she was a tyrannical monster, I don't really feel that comfortable in describing her as a tyrannical monster. There's just some parts of me that makes me feel bad for her. Like the time when she got fired by MGM. I felt bad for her then. The time when her husband, or was it her boyfriend? I think she married to this guy who was like the CEO for Pepsi Cola. I don't know his name. Alfred Steele, yes. For a moment there, I was almost going to call him Mr. Pepsi, but no, his name was Alfred Steele, played by Harry Dawes. You know, when he died, you know, I felt bad for her. But there's a lot of stuff in this movie that makes it very difficult for me to take full-blown sympathy, because she's just so unhinged in her actions and her motives. It just frightens me. If anything, I took a great deal of sympathy for Christina, who was brave to put up with the tyranny that her mother possessed. And I'm not going to fully sugarcoat her either. If she wasn't so self-contained from people around her, I would have deemed her more as the heroine in this movie. Aside from the overacting, the off-camera aspects were underplayed, like the direction and the script. But most of all, it's the editing that's very atrocious. The scenes are never fleshed out, and the timelines are pretty much all over the place, making every scene incoherent and confusing. Everything feels like loose threads, and nothing seems to connect with each other. One minute Joan is celebrating the moment winning the Oscar for her performance in the 1945 movie Mildred Pierce. And next thing you know, she's gone ballistic over her daughter using wire hangers to hang her clothes. Another example is 1 minute after another brutal fight between Joan and Christina. She sends her to a Catholic school to teach her discipline, and the Mother Superior promises to reform her. Next scene, Christina just checks out, and the Mother Superior wishes her well without no indication of what went on in the convention, the convent, and how it impacted Christina when the nun did what the nun did to discipline Christina like she promised. It's like, I thought that she was going to, like really imply a lot of discipline. And if you think that her torturous, tyrannical nature of her mother was bad, if you ever listen to people who were raised in orphanages, in convents, that place is no picnic either. Those nuns can be kind of cruel and tyrannical in their own ways as well. So I don't know what happened there. But all I know is when she got out of the convent, it seemed like the Mother Superior was like, goodbye, take care, see you around. Almost as though as if her being sent to Catholic school, being raised by nuns, was more like a picnic. And maybe it wasn't such a bad place after all. Or maybe she just managed to somehow stay on good terms, even through all the tough love that's inflicted by the nuns. I don't know. There is no indication as to what happened behind there. I mean, they were supposed to give her like really strict disciplinary orders, but then when she comes out, it's like nothing happened. Knowing the way the nuns disciplined students back then, they were just as tyrannical and maybe even worse than Joan Crawford. But when Christina was discharged, she looked unscathed. The other people who have interacted with Joan Crawford never fully develops. Her relationship with her personal assistant, Carolyn, played by Rutanya Alda, is quite flat and anticlimactic. And sometimes I even often ask myself, how did Carolyn, her personal assistant, manage to be one of the longest running employees? It's like, does she just have a great deal of patience? Or does she actually know how to get on Joan's good side? In some ways, Carolyn is almost like, she was almost like a second parent to Christina and Chris, and she actually treated them like the way a real mother should have treated them, instead of, just being overbearing and cruel. And then there's the housekeeper, Helga, played by Alice Nunn, who gets scolded by Joan for leaving a speck of dust on the floor. Oh yeah, that's right, I forgot. Aside from being a control freak, Joan Crawford is also a frickin' neat freak. And then we have the fictional lover named Greg Savitt, played by Steve Forrest, who gets dumped after he tells her she's getting old. And then there's her fourth marriage to a bigwig CEO of Pepsi Cola named Alfred Steele, played by Harry Gause, who wants to use his finance to lavish their new penthouse apartment in Manhattan. And then after his sudden death, she fights hard to stay on the executive board with the Pepsi company. And the scenes about her acting career are fragmented, indicating we are not watching a biopic, but a visual diary of an angry, disgruntled, disjointed actress. So instead of saying a biopic, looking at into the movies that she starred in, or looking at the roles that she just played throughout her career, no, we don't get any of that. To me, this movie could have been just Diary of an Angry, Disgruntled Hollywood Actress. That probably would have been a more apropos movie title. Long-winded, sure, but effective. Now I know I've had a lot of negative things to say about Mommie Dearest, and rightfully so. But I'm a nice guy. I might be a little temperamental sometimes. I might sometimes go a bit unhinged myself. And I've had my share of meltdowns as well. But I actually do have a heart in me, and it's never meant to be tyrannical or for malice. Just sometimes things don't always go as planned, and sometimes I do get overwhelmed, and it does make me a little bit upset and nervous. And sometimes when I do break into anger spells, I just want to let you know something. I'm sorry that I do that sometimes. I don't do it all the time. I don't do it every day. Just when sometimes things don't always go well. Okay. I I sometimes just stop and say to myself, why am I acting like this? Things can be handled very well. And that everything is okay. And that you don't have to be like this. It doesn't have to be that way. And you know what? Even though this movie was really, really bad, I'm not going to say that everything about this movie was awful. And I think it was kind of unfair that Faye Dunaway's career never recovered fully. I mean, she does do what was given to her, and maybe it's not entirely her fault per se why this movie sucked. She does perform through the atrocious material that's given to her, and I'm sure she was doing this to appease to the people who were working behind the film. And I guess I'll give her credit for just, doing what's been told of her to do. But I think she should have known better not to have trusted anybody who made this movie. She should have known when to step down. So I can't take 100% pity for her, but I do take pity for her for this movie because it did kill her career. Okay, yeah, she still made movies, but she didn't really get the high impact that she did, like compared to the 60s, the 70s, and she never really fully recovered. I mean, she still made movies, but they were nothing like of high profile after that. If there's anybody in terms of acting, I would also like to give credit to a young Mara Hobel for the complex role of little Christina. And yeah, the sets were like what you would expect in the 40s and 50s, but in the end, what was the reward for it all? In the end, it knows how it wants to look back, but lacks in how we should feel about it. Personally, I would not recommend this movie at all. It saddens me to say this, It was just one of the most uncomforting, very, very laboring movie to watch. It was hard to sit through a lot of the scenes. And although it was meant to be a biopic drama focusing on her movie career, the roles she played, instead we just end up getting a few snippets of scenes that just don't seem to be coherent. I mean, one minute we're watching her bask in glory, next thing you know, she gets fired from her job at MGM, and then we just cut to the next scene where she's just destroying her garden in the backyard with no reason, no motive, and no purpose. So what was it that we were watching? I wouldn't recommend this movie. I'm sorry to say this. And it's not often I really give low scores, but I'm afraid that if I was to give this movie a scale out of 10, I would have to give Mommie Dearest a 2. It was that bad. I don't think I got anything else to say about this. So, to everybody out there, always make sure to love your mothers. And look back and say to yourself, thank God I don't have a mother like Joan Crawford. And if you do have a mother like Joan Crawford, it's okay to stick up and stand up to her and just simply tell her to back off. I hope that you guys all find your peace and love. And I do want to wish you all the best of luck. Mothers are supposed to be, the loving, caring people. And sometimes you say to yourself, if you can't find the love or the affection from your mother, then there's really no hope for anybody. I leave you all with all the best of respects to each and every one of you. So always be kind to your mother. Always show them your affection towards them. And even though there might be a few instances where personal vendettas could sometimes arise, take the time to look back and realize the love that your mother has, because it's probably going to be the best love you're ever going to get. I promise you that. So I guess this ends my writer review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my YouTube channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to want to leave a comment, go right ahead. But just remember the 3 simple rules. Be kind, be courteous, and please refrain from any rude comments. And I will be back again with another movie review. Hopefully maybe something a little more, I don't know, enjoyable maybe. But until next time, this is Eric Red Rider saying, keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.